This is not your average pen test video. There are a million pen test videos out there on YouTube. You can find just about any pen on just about any type of paper. But it wasn't until recently when I was walking a friend through how to test her own pens in her own notebook that I realized there aren't a lot of guides for how to do your own pen test, or what you should be getting out of them, or how you should be doing them in your notebooks. That's why in this video, I'm gonna walk you through the steps for how to test your own pens in your own notebook so that you can have all the information about your paper and your pen combinations at your fingertips. You know what they say, teach a planner girly to pen test and you'll feed them for a lifetime, or something like that. As always, we're gonna start with some supplies. To do this test, you are going to need your favorite pens and the notebook of your choice. I have 3 different notebooks to demonstrate for you today, but you really only need the one that you're actually going to use. So we're gonna start with this one. You'll notice I said your favorite pens because you really don't ever need to test all of the pens you own in one notebook unless you are intending to use all of the pens you own in that notebook. For me, I always like to test my favorite ballpoint pen, my favorite gel pen, my favorite highlighters, and then any art pens that I plan on using as well. Of course, I have like a million colors of Tombow markers, but I'm not going to be testing all of these in this notebook because I really don't need to use all of them in this notebook. And you can always come back and add to your pen test page later if you do end up wanting to use more than one color. But for me, I am just going to test this Tombow color in 312, which is kind of a nice seafoam green color, along with my other pens. And the other pens I am using for this experiment are going to be the Uniball Jetstream ballpoint pen. This one is in 0.38. This is a main writing utensil I like to use in all my planners. I'm also going to be testing my favorite gel pen, which is the Uniball Signo Micro 207. This is actually in 0.5. They have one in 0.7, but I like the 0.5 size. I'm also going to be testing a mild liner. This is in the color Coral, I think. It is not my favorite highlighter. I don't actually use this in many notebooks. I'm just going to be using it for this test purpose. What I actually use for highlighters are my Tombow and my Zig brushables, which are technically like art pens, like they're technically felt tip art markers. As I said before, my Tombow's in 312 and the Zig brushables is dual-sided in the color Platinum. And then 2 others that I use for things like outlining layouts and doing headers are the Tombow Fudonosuke in hard tip and the Micron, the Sakura Pigma Micron. I use 0.5 to outline a lot of my templates. So we're going to be pen testing these pens in this notebook, which is a Leuchtturm 1917 standard bullet journal type notebook. It's not the official bullet journal planning, but it does have the dot grid, which you will see in a second. A quick note on the purpose of a pen test as well. A pen test has a few different purposes. You are testing a pen's performance on the page. So this can include things like smudging or how long the ink takes to dry on a given page. You're also testing resistance, or what the writing utensil feels like against the page. You can also call this tooth of the paper. You are going to be testing ghosting, or how much of the pen you can see on the other side of the page, bleeding, or the amount of pen that actually goes all the way through the paper to the other page behind it. And of course, you're going to be testing the overall user experience of the pen in relationship to the paper. And that part is highly personal and is really related to how hard you normally press when you're writing, how much flow you like to have, etc. So I'm going to walk you through how to test with these things in mind. So step 1, you're going to grab your notebook and you're going to turn to a blank page. Now, a lot of the time, people will use the very last page in a notebook. So this is a Hubman and Chub Girl notebook, Christmas themed. You want to turn to the very last page if you can, because this means that you are going to be using the back of the notebook where not a lot of important notes are going to go. Of course, if you put a lot of important notes in the back of the notebook, don't do this, but essentially you want to skip past this little like cardboardy paper that just sticks the whole book together, and you want to get to the actual page with the actual print that you are using. And you want to make sure when you're doing this that the opposite side of your pen test page is blank and the page following it is blank. So obviously I've done a little bit of like blocking out certain layouts on this page and counting the dots, but because this page is mostly blank and this page is mostly blank, I think it will do just fine for my pen test purposes. So this is going to be what you're going to be using. Now, if you don't want to do the back page of your notebook, you can do just about any page. This is an old Leuchtturm that I have, and I have filled up the back pages of this with many different like tests and washi washi strips and other things like that. So I'm just moving to the next available page, which you can totally do as well. But you want this page somewhere where you can easily find it, because this is actually going to be a reference page. This is considered, if you're in the bullet journal world, this can be considered a collection, a reference. I want to hop in here and say a quick word about this week's sponsor, Rachelle. Rachelle offers traceable vegan health supplements for everything from pregnancy to skincare to today's topic, gut health. I have been taking their Synbiotic for a few weeks now. They just launched this, and it is a prebiotic, probiotic, and postbiotic. It is so hard to find a gut health supplement that includes a postbiotic, but postbiotics actually provide fuel to the cells that make up the gut lining and support gut barrier function, so you kind of need them. All of this is packed into one tiny little delayed release capsule that is delivered to your door every single month. My favorite thing about Rachelle is the emphasis on transparency. The ingredients in Rachelle supplements aren't shrouded in mystery. Rachelle actually uses traceable ingredients so that you always know exactly what you're putting into your body and where they came from. And this is true for all of their products: multivitamins, protein powder, prenatals, you name it. So if any of this sounds up your alley, scan the QR code on the screen or go to ritual.com/RachelInTheory20 and use my code RachelInTheory20 for 20% off your first month. Thanks again to Rachelle for sponsoring, and let's get back to the video. So the next step that you're going to do is you're going to take the pens you're testing and you're going to follow the following steps for each and every pen. First, you're going to write the name of the pen. Then you are going to do a little squiggle of the pen next to your writing to see what a concentrated section of the pen looks like. This will serve to test the general writing experience with the pen and also enable you to see ghosting and bleeding on the pages behind it. And then you are going to do a smudge test. When testing smudges, I like to test them at 3 stages. 1, immediately. 2, 5 seconds, and 3, 10 seconds. Normally, I do have a tiny little timer by me when I do this, but you can just count in your head. Okay, test over. Now we're going to talk about how you can tell which one performed the best. Chances are you're going to like a few of the pens you try, dislike others. This is up to personal preference. As I said, it has a lot to do with the writing experience as well, which is unfortunately just not something I can convey over camera, but I can talk a little bit about that. So first, we want to see what bled, what ghosted. If we flip it over, we can see that pretty much all of the pens ghosted in some way on the back of this paper. I don't know if you guys can see exactly how much, but it looks pretty much like every single pen ghosted. Obviously, the darker pens ghosted more, and then when I was pressing harder, that ghosted even more. Nothing bled though, which is great. Usually things will not bleed all the way through unless you're using like a Sharpie or some sort of paint marker that really is not meant for general use. But this was pretty nice because nothing went all the way through. Now, personally, I don't mind ghosting. I don't care about ghosting. Some people really dislike ghosting. And if that's you, you want to go for very thick paper, like art paper level thick paper in your journals. And notebooks like from Archer and Olive are good for that because they have like really like 160, I think, 160 GSM paper, which basically means it's very thick. And also I know their paper is very absorbent as well. I don't mind ghosting, but a bleed through is a no-go. I absolutely will not use a pen that has bled through. Also, if a pen smudges, it's usually a no-go for me, but this highly depends on what I'm using it for. So for example, I love the writing experience of the Uniball Signo Micron 2.7. And you can see in this journal, it performs really, really well. The immediate smudge test has a little bit of smudging. 5 seconds is pretty good. 10 seconds is obviously nothing is wrong. So I typically like a pen that doesn't smudge at all for doing things like planning when I'm writing in calendars or weeklies or a to-do list, because usually my hand is jumping all over the page when I am planning. I'm doing like a calendar event here, I'm doing a note up here, I'm adding a highlight up here. So when I have a circumstance in which I am writing all over the page at various different times and just letting my brain run wild. This is also true if I'm like brainstorming on a page for something. I like a pen that does not smudge no matter what. But for the purposes of like what I use like Loic terms for is usually just like journaling. I don't mind a smudgy pen for journaling, mostly because I am not doing that hand motion where I'm going up and around on the page a bunch of different times. When I'm journaling, I'm usually just doing top to bottom, top to bottom. Also, I should say I am right-handed, so I'm not left-handed. For you lefties out there, your pen tests are going to look completely different. I have heard for left-handed people that smudging is a much bigger deal because of just the way that your hand moves over the words. So you might care a lot more about smudging than I do for things like journaling and not care as much about it when your hand is jumping over the page. Whereas for me, I really care about it when my hand is jumping over the page. I don't really care about it for journaling. Now, for testing purposes, I also tested a few of the pens in one of my favorite planners, which is the Hobonichi Cousin. So I mentioned I like to use big notebooks like this for journaling and sort of mapping my thoughts out, but I like to plan in Hobonichi Cousins or in basically planners that have this really thin sort of like Bible-like paper called Tomoe River paper. It's a lot thinner than our cousin over here in the Leuchtturm, and that's why it needs its own set of tests. This is the portion of the pen test that gets a little bit nerdy, so if you're just here to see how to do a pen test top to bottom, this is your goal, this is your baby, and you can make your decisions based on this, as far as I'm concerned, because it's all my favorite pens in my favorite notebook, and I know how they perform. But just to give you a comparison on paper, I wanted you to see just how differently pens performed on different pieces of paper. So let's start with the Uniball Signo Micron. You can see that it absorbs way better into this paper than it does into this paper. The immediately smudging was so smudged immediately. The Uniball Jetstream, meanwhile, performed better on this paper than on this paper. When I tried to smudge it immediately, it barely made a dent, whereas on this paper, the smudge lasted so long. This could be because I was writing more letters here and fewer letters here, but you can still kind of see the difference. Same thing with my Tombos. The immediately smudge basically renders this IMM illegible, whereas over here you can still see IMM even though the smudge is pretty bad. So there's lots of differences based on type of paper. And that's because paper has a few different composition qualities, such as GSM, which basically stands for grams per square meter. It's a way to test paper, like how heavy the paper is. So this has I think 52 GSM, and this has, I think, like 80 GSM. So it's basically testing the weight. Lots of things can go into how things will perform on different pieces of paper. Even journals made of the same paper can have different pen test results. For example, this is my Take a Note planner for 2024. It is also Tomoe River paper, the same paper that's in the Hobonichi Cousin, and I tested just the Uniball Signo and the Uni Jetstream to show you guys the difference. You can see the Uniball Signo performed slightly better on this Tomoe River paper than on this Tomoe River paper. 5 seconds is very blurred here, not so blurred here. And you can tell that the Uniball Jetstream also performed better on this paper than on this paper. No smudge. This is because paper coating can be involved in how a pen is tested. The dryness of the paper can be involved in how a pen tests. And that's why it's important to do a pen test in every notebook you own so you don't start writing with something and end up with a bad experience. I'll also say that different weights of certain pens will sometimes perform differently. You can see here I tested the Tombow brush tip, and then I also tested its fine tip because I was making sure that both performed well if I wanted to use both sides of the Tombow pen. They both performed pretty much the same, but it can have an effect. You can see it really well in the Sakura Pigma Micron here, where the 0.005, the very small size, had no smudging, but the 0.5, which I tested after the fact, had a good amount of smudging. So different pen sizes, different paper types, different brands, this can all affect how your pens perform. So you need to be doing your pen tests to make sure you use the right pen for the right notebook. The very last thing I'll say that you might want to test is very important for thin paper like the Tomoe River paper, and that is the sort of press through feel. So it's kind of hard to see, but you can kind of tell that in addition to a significant amount of ghosting that this paper has, there is a little bit of bump and raise to certain pens when you're pressing them onto the paper. So you get a sort of after effect that just like feels like you can feel where the pen was pressed into if you feel it with your fingers. Some people really like that, some people really don't. If you don't like that, you can buy pencil boards that go on the other side of the page so that it mitigates that press through effect. Personally, I really like that. It makes my journals feel lived in, so I don't mind a little bit of press through. I don't mind a little bit of smudging. I'm a person. My planner is a person's planner. It's gonna get get smudged and torn and messed up, and it's going to be beautiful at the end of the day. So that's how I do my pen tests. I hope this answered questions about them, and I hope you use this as a valuable resource in the future. Okay, that is everything I know about testing pens on paper, I promise. If you still have questions, let me know down in the comment box below so we can all share and learn from each other. And if you have a universal pen, the one pen you swear by above all other pens for any type of paper, leave it down below. I love to try new stuff. Thanks again to Rachelle for sponsoring this video. Make sure to check out the link in my description if you want your gut health to be as productive as you are. If you are curious about finding your perfect planner in which to use your favorite pens, click on the video I have next to my head right here on the screen. Besides that, I love you so much. Thank you for coming, for being subscribed, for being awesome, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.